Today, all the male members of the family are under jail sentence, and Mrs. Tibbs is recovering from an overdose of drugs taken last night. The Tibbs gang was a family affair, and it was the head of the family, James Tibbs, who was given the heaviest sentence, 15 years for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, conspiracy to blackmail, and possessing ammunition. His lieutenants were his 3 sons. John on the left got 7 years for attempted murder. Jimmy Tibbs, a one-time professional boxer, got 10 years for attempted murder, unlawful wounding, assaulting a policeman, and possessing a firearm. And Robert Tibbs, who at 21 is the youngest, got 15 months on 2 charges of wounding. All the offences occurred in London's East End. Perhaps the most serious was the attempted murder of the licensee of the Black Boy pub. He was attacked by 4 men wielding knives and an axe. His 16 wounds required 80 stitches, and in hospital he was given 6 pints of blood. According to one theory, the Tibbs tried to fill a power vacuum left after the Kray and Richardson gangs had been smashed. If so, they've failed, and many people will be sleeping more easily because of that.
In the heart of London, during the tumultuous 1970s, the city was a cauldron of social unrest and simmering tensions. Amidst the backdrop of gritty streets and smoky boxing gyms, a young man named Jimmy Tibbs found himself caught in a web far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. It was a time when family loyalties could blur the lines between right and wrong, and Jimmy, ensnared in a bitter family feud that spilled into the violent world of gang warfare, faced challenges that would test his character and resolve. But this is not just a story of violence and conflict. It is also a story of redemption and the power of the human capacity for change. So how did a man, entangled in extreme gang violence, manage to turn his life around and become one of the most revered boxing trainers in modern times? This is the story of Jimmy Tibbs, a man who was once entangled in a world of chaos and danger, but found an unexpected path to greatness. From the shadow of prison walls to the bright lights of the boxing ring, Jimmy's transformation is proof that it is never too late for growth and reinvention. Jimmy Tibbs was born and raised in the vibrant and often tough neighborhood of Canning Town, East London. Growing up in the 1950s and 60s, Jimmy was part of a close-knit working-class community where everyone knew each other, and family ties ran deep. His upbringing was rooted in the traditions of his Roman Catholic faith, which played a significant role in shaping his early years. He attended St. Helens Catholic Primary School and then moved on to St. Bonaventure's, an all-boys Catholic school known for its discipline and strong community spirit. His passion for boxing began at just 11 when his father took him to the West Ham Boxing Club. He quickly fell in love with the sport, and the gym became his second home, where he learned discipline, hard work, and perseverance. As a young amateur boxer, Jimmy immediately showed his talent, fighting for England and winning every title available, except the ABA championships. With an impressive amateur record of 74 wins and only 6 losses, his aggressive style made him a formidable opponent in the ring, setting the stage for a promising boxing career. At the age of 15, he left school to work in his family's scrap metal business, a common path for many young men in his community at the time. But his passion for boxing never waned. By the age of 19 in 1966, Jimmy made the decision to turn professional. He signed with Terry Lawless and Mickey Duff, 2 of the most influential figures in British boxing, comparable to the likes of Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn today. Under their guidance, he began to make a name for himself in the professional boxing world, continuing to build on the strong foundation he had established as an amateur. He made his professional boxing debut on February 22, 1966, at the Royal Albert Hall in London, where he faced Eddie Lennon. In this highly anticipated match, Tibbs showcased himself, winning by TKO, and announcing his arrival in the professional boxing scene with authority. The win set the tone for his early career, marked by a string of successful fights that quickly established him as a promising fighter to watch out for. After just 4 fights in a span of 2 months since turning pro, he even had the chance to spar with Muhammad Ali, who was in London preparing for his fight against Henry Cooper. During the session, Jimmy threw a couple of jabs, and to everyone's shock, connected with a right that briefly knocked Ali down, making headlines.
Very modest man. I mean, they asked a 19-year-old kid, Jimmy Tibbs, not Tibbs, to spar with him. He could have said he was defending his heavyweight championship of the world, he could have said, look, I haven't got time for that.
Yeah.
But he did. He took time out to spar with me. And when I got in the ring with him, it was just a fantastic feeling. I reached out for a jab and a right cross and a left hook. The next thing I know, he's on the deck. I didn't lay a glove on him. And they was clicking away with the cameras and it went all around the world. He done that for me. You know, what a great man.
A photo of Ali on the canvas with a 19-year-old Jimmy standing over him was later featured on the front page of the sports section of the New York Times, making Tibbs one of the first British boxers to achieve such recognition. After the media frenzy, Jimmy was invited to fight on the undercard of the Ali vs. Cooper fight at Highbury on May 21, 1966. Fighting on such a prestigious stage was a dream come true. Despite being knocked down twice in the first round, Tibbs showed heart to come back and stop Tom Calderwood in the second round, adding another win to his record. While his professional career was on an upward trajectory, the world outside the ring was beginning to pull Jimmy in a different direction. A family feud with local gangsters was escalating, threatening to overshadow his burgeoning boxing career. As tensions rose, Jimmy found himself drawn into a conflict that had nothing to do with the sport he loved, but would soon dramatically alter the course of his life. This unexpected twist would lead him away from the ring and into a battle for survival, setting the stage for the next tumultuous chapter of his life. Following the downfall of the notorious Richardson torture gang in the late 1960s and the imprisonment of the Kray twins, East London was momentarily relieved from the grip of organized crime. These gangs, infamous for their brutality and reign of terror, had kept London's criminal underworld in a tight, violent grasp. With their leaders behind bars, the East End experienced a fleeting period of peace and stability. However, the removal of these dominant criminal forces created a power vacuum that soon sparked a new wave of violence and lawlessness. In the absence of the Richardsons and the Krays, smaller gangs and criminal factions emerged, eager to claim control over the lucrative rackets left behind. This scramble for dominance turned East London into a battleground reminiscent of Prohibition-era Chicago, where gang warfare and violent power struggles became the norm. The streets, once under the fearsome order of the Krays and Richardsons, now descended into chaos as various groups fought for supremacy. Amidst this volatile landscape, a feud erupted between the Tibbs family and the Nichols family, two East End clans caught in a bitter and bloody conflict. What began as a personal dispute quickly escalated into a full-scale gang war, with both sides drawing on their networks of associates and enforcers. The violence that ensued was brutal and unforgiving, involving street fights, stabbings, and shootings that terrorized the community. Jimmy Tibbs, who had by this time made a name for himself in the boxing ring, found himself unwillingly dragged into this maelstrom of violence due to his familial ties. The feud between the Tibbs and Nichols families is part of East End legend, with both sides seeking retribution for perceived slights and past grievances. For Jimmy, the conflict was a far cry from the discipline and focus of boxing. Instead, he was pulled into a world of chaos and bloodshed, where the rules of the ring no longer applied, and survival often depended on split-second decisions and brutal force. The violent encounters that followed were not just about territory or power, but were deeply personal, fueled by a toxic mix of pride, anger, and the desire for vengeance. James "Big Jim" Tibbs was the patriarch of the Tibbs family, a well-known clan in East London, and the father of three sons: Jimmy, a promising light heavyweight professional boxer, and Robert and John, who were both involved in the family scrap metal business. The Tibbs family had long-standing tensions with the Nichols brothers, Albert and Terry, as well as Leonard Kersey, a public house manager who was closely associated with the Nichols. The feud reached a boiling point when Albert Nichols, who was 20 at the time, got into a heated argument with George Tibbs, Jimmy's 55-year-old uncle. During the altercation, Nichols attacked the older man, blackening his eye and knocking out two of his teeth. The attack on George was seen as a grave insult to the Tibbs family, and they decided to retaliate. In response, a violent encounter took place where three members of the Tibbs family ambushed Albert Nichols. In the brutal attack that followed, Nichols was shot in the stomach and legs with a shotgun, inflicting severe injuries. As if this weren't enough, Nichols was also beaten with a garden spade, leaving him with a split-open head, deep cuts across his face, and partial severing of the tip of his nose and a finger. The viciousness of the attack marked a dramatic escalation in the ongoing feud between the two families. and what followed would leave Jimmy Tibbs's boxing aspirations over. When fines and suspended sentences were handed down for the violent clashes between the Tibbs and Nichols families, many in the community felt that justice had not been fully served. The sense of injustice lingered, and tensions between them only intensified. 2 years later, this tension reached a tragic peak when Robert Tibbs, Jimmy's younger brother, was brutally attacked in a pub, having his throat slashed in a vicious assault. Despite the severity of the attack, no arrests were made. In response to the police's inquiries, Big Jim Tibbs, the family patriarch, made it clear that they intended to handle the matter themselves, stating, "We'll deal with it in our own way." What followed was a series of violent reprisals that escalated the feud to even greater levels of brutality. Members of both factions were targeted in a wave of beatings and shootings. In one particular incident at Christmas in 1970, Leonard Kersey, who had previously insulted the Tibbs family by calling them dirty pikeys, became the target of a horrific attack. Armed with a meat cleaver and knives, members of the Tibbs gang ambushed Kersey, hacking and slashing at him mercilessly. Kersey was left with 16 wounds that required 80 stitches and a blood transfusion of 6 pints to save his life. The violence didn't stop there. In March 1971, the Nichols brothers, Albert and Terry, were also viciously attacked by the Tibbs gang. They suffered severe injuries, but any thoughts of seeking justice through the courts were quickly quashed by threats from Big Jim. He warned them that if they dared to press charges, their wives and children would be targeted with acid attacks. The atmosphere of fear and intimidation created by these threats ensured that no legal actions were pursued, allowing the cycle of violence to continue unchecked. This series of events marked a dark and chaotic period in East London's history, with the Tibbs family deeply embroiled in a cycle of retribution and violence that seemed to have no end. Jimmy later described the conflict saying, "I didn't wake up one day and decide I wanted to be a gangster. It just happened that I wanted to get hold of these people that took the liberty with my brother. I felt evil in me. I just wanted revenge." As the feud between the Tibbs and Nichols families intensified, the violence escalated to new and more dangerous levels. Explosions began to rock the community, targeting the very livelihood of those involved. Scrap metal yards, cafes, and other establishments associated with both families became the focus of a murderous bombing campaign. The conflict reached a terrifying new height when a bomb was placed under the bonnet of Jimmy Tibbs's van. As he was driving with his 4-year-old son to school, the device detonated. Miraculously, despite the force of the explosion, both Jimmy and his young son emerged completely unscathed. The attack was a stark reminder of the lengths to which both sides were willing to go, showing that in this violent feud, no one was safe, not even innocent family members and children. The Metropolitan Police realized that the escalating violence between the Tibbs and Nichols families required drastic action. They decided to bring in their most formidable officer, Detective Chief Superintendent Burt Wickstead, who was notorious for his hardline tactics and relentless pursuit of criminals. Known as the Old Gray Fox and the Gangbuster, Wickstead had a reputation for cracking down on organized crime with an iron fist. Believing the Tibbs family were the main aggressors, which has been heavily disputed, Wickstead focused on breaking up their operations. He planned to use the Nichols brothers and Leonard Kersey as key witnesses against them. On April 4th, 1972, Wickstead led a large-scale raid, coordinating 160 officers to simultaneously search 40 locations linked to both families and their associates. The operation was swift and decisive. Law enforcement seized a large cache of weapons, including rifles, shotguns, revolvers, knives, swords, and pickaxe handles, all evidence of the violent potential held by both sides of the feud. In total, 20 people were arrested in the raids, marking a significant crackdown on the gangs involved in the ongoing war, and an attempt by Wickstead to restore some semblance of order to the streets of East London. The response from the Tibbs family was immediate and aggressive. Threats were made as soon as the arrests occurred. "We'll fillet the lot of you. You won't get away with this." The situation escalated when the police arrested Jimmy's mother on charges of allegedly handling stolen goods. This arrest was seen as a step too far by the Tibbs family, and the atmosphere grew even more charged and dangerous. A bounty of £1,000 was placed on the heads of the arresting officer and Detective Chief Superintendent Burt Wickstead, specifically offering the reward to anyone who would blow off their legs. Additional threats included bombing the officer's home and throwing acid in his wife's face. Due to the severity of these threats, Wickstead and his family were quickly relocated for their safety, and the officer in question was granted permission to carry a firearm at all times. On December 7, 1968, they were eventually arrested. The charges against the Tibbs family and their associates were extensive and serious, including attempted murder, wounding, blackmail, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. Despite their strong denials, the evidence presented in a 43-day trial was compelling. The result was a significant victory for law enforcement, with members of the gang receiving a combined total of 58 years in prison. Jimmy Tibbs was convicted of attempted murder, unlawful wounding, assaulting a police officer, and gun possession. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. His brother John received 7 years for attempted murder, and the youngest brother, Robert, received 15 months for 2 counts of wounding. 3 family associates were also convicted for their part in the violence, with Michael Michaud receiving 11 years, Stanley Naylor sentenced to 12 years, and Michael Logan receiving 2 years. Their father, James Tibbs, received the largest sentence of 15 years for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, although the specifics of this charge are not widely detailed. Jimmy vehemently claimed his father was completely innocent of any wrongdoing, despite these harsh sentences. Tragically, Jimmy's mother took an overdose the night before their sentencing, but fortunately made a full recovery. Jimmy Tibbs said he felt a sense of relief when he was arrested, as he didn't see no other way for the violence to end. He was initially sent to Brixton Prison, but over the course of his sentence, he was transferred to several other facilities, including Wormwood Scrubs, Chelmsford, Wandsworth, and Maidstone. During his time in prison, he worked as a gym orderly, choosing to keep his head down and avoid any further trouble. The gym became a refuge for him, a place where he could focus on fitness and maintain some semblance of normalcy in a challenging environment.
It was very hard for me in prison. I mean, prisons are different today as they were 2 years ago, but when I was in prison, if you just kept yourself to yourself and done your own thing, they used to leave you alone. Just got on with doing your bird, like, you know. But you still got that thing hanging over your head. If anything happens to your wife or kids, you're in here and you can't get out to help them. Many a time I've closed that door and shed a tear. Didn't let anyone know, but that's how I was. Mustn't let anyone see I'm choked about it, but I was gutted.
After serving 5 years of his 10-year sentence, Jimmy was released on parole. Reflecting on his freedom, he later admitted, "When I look back at it now, I wish I'd asked Terry Lawless to get my boxing licenses back because I was only 30. I could have had another go at it." Upon his release from prison, instead of returning to boxing, he went back to the scrap metal business, determined to rebuild his life. He threw himself into the work, helping to expand and grow the family business. Things were going well, and they were making good money, until one day, the Greater London Council decided to build a new road that would run right through their scrapyard. This meant they had to sell the property through a compulsory purchase order, receiving compensation for the loss of their business location. With his share of the money, Jimmy decided it was time for a change. He chose not to stay in the scrap business and began looking for a new direction in life. In 1981, driven by a mix of nostalgia and curiosity, he visited his old gym above the Royal Oak pub to catch up with Terry Lawless, his former manager. During their conversation, Terry asked him for a favor. He needed someone to help look after the fighters while he took a break and went to America. Jimmy agreed, not realizing how this decision would set the stage for a new chapter in his life. Jimmy started helping in the gym, training fighters like Frank Bruno, Charlie Magri, Mark Kaler, and Barry McGuigan on the pads. His natural coaching talent quickly showed. When Terry returned from America, he found that the fighters had grown fond of Jimmy's coaching style and wanted him to stay on as a full-time trainer. This organic development marked the beginning of Jimmy Tibbs' career as a boxing trainer, a role in which he would find great success and fulfillment. "I gave my heart and soul to the fighters. Everything I had in me, I gave it to them training-wise. My boxing career was destroyed, partly through me but partly through other people. But the Lord kept me going to be a trainer." After his return to boxing, Jimmy Tibbs quickly became known for his ability to develop champions. He trained numerous world-class fighters, including the Dark Destroyer Nigel Benn, who successfully defended his WBC super middleweight title 7 times, Barry McGuigan, who won the WBA featherweight title, Frank Bruno, who went on to win the WBC heavyweight title, and Charlie Magri, who became the WBC flyweight champion. Tibbs's guidance and expertise were instrumental in shaping these fighters' careers and earning them championship titles, cementing his reputation as a top boxing trainer. Jimmy also trained his son, Mark Tibbs, through a successful amateur career, where Mark won various titles, including the schoolboy, NABC, and junior ABA championships. Following in his father's footsteps, Mark himself transitioned from a boxer to a trainer and went on to coach several notable fighters, including Dillian White, Johnny Fisher, Johnny Hedges, Tommy Fletcher, Charlie Duffield, and Billy Joe Saunders, whom his father had trained to a WBO middleweight title in 2015. After finding remarkable success as a trainer, 1990 saw Jimmy Tibbs undergo a profound transformation when he became a born-again Christian, a change he refers to as the birth of a Cockney Christian. After years marked by violence, anger, and personal turmoil, he turned to faith, seeking redemption and a new direction. This spiritual awakening brought him a deep sense of peace, which changed his outlook on life. He began focusing on positively impacting others, especially in the boxing world, where he continued to train and mentor fighters with a new perspective grounded in faith instead of rage and anger. In 2014, he released his autobiography, Sparring with Life, My Fight for Survival. This powerful book takes readers through the highs and lows of Tibbs's remarkable journey, from his early days as a boxer to his career as a highly respected boxing trainer. The book also explores his personal struggles outside the ring, including encounters with crime and his time spent in prison. Interestingly, the book was published shortly before Tibbs was diagnosed with cancer later that same year. His diagnosis added another layer of meaning to the title, Sparring with Life, as it became a reflection of his ongoing battle and resilience. Despite these challenges, Tibbs's story is one of redemption, determination, and the relentless fight to survive, making this autobiography an inspiring read for anyone interested in the human spirit and the world of boxing. In true fighting style, Jimmy managed to overcome the disease, a victory which he gives glory to God. Despite his tumultuous life, Jimmy Tibbs is proof that no matter how dark your chapters are, a brighter tomorrow is never out of the question. He once said, "I'm just an ordinary fella, but I truly believe that Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Some may still see me as that gangster, but I'm at peace with who I am now." And to that, I say, fair play, Jim. What do you think about Jimmy Tibbs' story? Were you inspired? What are your thoughts about the Nichols brothers not seeing any jail time? Do you think that was fair? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share, and subscribe to Dark Sleuth Secrets for more compelling stories of redemption and transformation. And leave a comment about which part of Jimmy's journey resonated most with you. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious and keep sleuthing.